Radio crackled at 12:17 a.m., cutting through the quiet of Officer Renee Carter's patrol shift. Unit 23, code 10-35 at the Grand Elmont Hotel. Suspicious male subject near service elevators. Multiple guest complaints, requesting immediate response. Renee acknowledged and flipped on her lights. At 31, with 7 years on the force, she'd built her reputation on swift, decisive action. The Grand Elmont rose like a glass monument in the financial district, its lobby gleaming with marble and chandeliers that cost more than her annual salary. When she stepped inside, a small crowd had gathered near the elevators. Guests in designer robes, phones raised, whispers spreading like wildfire. At the center stood a man in a faded maintenance uniform, hands visible and non-threatening. Beside him, a small boy clutched a worn backpack, his eyes wide with confusion. The hotel manager, Richard Voss, approached Renee immediately, his cologne expensive and his tone urgent. "Officer, thank God. This individual has been loitering near guest rooms with a child. Several guests feel unsafe. We need this handled quickly and discreetly." Evan Walker looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from years of overnight shifts in single parenthood. When Renee asked him to explain himself, his voice came out steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I work here, third shift maintenance. My son Lucas fell asleep while I was cleaning conference rooms. I was taking him to the break room." But phones were already recording. Assumptions had crystallized into certainty. The pressure to act, to demonstrate authority, pressed down on Renee like physical weight. She reached for her handcuffs, and everything that followed would haunt her forever. The metal cuffs clicked into place with a sound that echoed through the marble lobby. Lucas's scream shattered the expensive silence. "Daddy, no! Don't take my daddy!" The 8-year-old lunged forward, but a security guard caught him gently, holding him back as he fought and sobbed. Evan didn't resist, didn't argue, but every line of his body showed defeat. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Please, not in front of my boy." But it was too late. Dozens of phones captured the moment from every angle. A black man in a janitor's uniform, handcuffed like a criminal, while his son begged for mercy. Richard Voss stood at a distance, arms crossed, nodding with satisfaction. "Thank you, officer. We can't have this element making our guests uncomfortable." Renee felt something twist in her chest but pushed it down. This was procedure. This was protection. She had a job to do. As she conducted the standard pat-down search, checking for weapons or contraband, her hand brushed Evan's right forearm. The fabric of his uniform sleeve slid back slightly, revealing a faded tattoo. A shield with angular geometry, a Roman numeral XVEI inside, and 2 words below. Silent Guardian. Renee's breath caught. Her hand froze on his arm. She knew that symbol. 15 years ago, her mentor, Sergeant Malcolm Hayes, had shown her a photograph of his military unit, pointing to men whose faces were shadowed but whose arms bore that exact mark. "These men went into hell to pull people out," Malcolm had said quietly. "If you ever see this symbol, remember, that person sacrificed everything so others could live." Renee quickly pulled Evan's sleeve down, her mind reeling, but the damage was done. She'd already committed to the arrest in front of witnesses, in front of cameras, in front of a terrified child who would never forget this moment. At 1:30 a.m., the police station hummed with fluorescent exhaustion. Renee processed Evan mechanically, fingerprints, photographs, personal belongings cataloged in plastic bags. He cooperated in silence, his eyes empty, his thoughts clearly with his son. Lucas had left the hotel screaming in a neighbor's arms, and that sound echoed in Renee's mind like an accusation. Sergeant Kevin Morrison reviewed her report with furrowed brows. "Hotel security called about a suspicious person, and you arrested him for what exactly?" His tone wasn't angry, just weary. "Did you verify his employment? Check his story with his supervisor?" The questions landed like stones in Renee's stomach. She had followed protocol: assess, control, secure, but she'd skipped the most important step: investigate. Morrison made 2 calls. The first reached Tom Santos, Evan's supervisor, who confirmed everything. Evan had written permission to bring Lucas that night, had worked at the hotel for 3 years without incident, was one of their most reliable employees. The second call to child services cleared Evan immediately. There was no endangerment, no violation, no crime, just a father trying to work while caring for his son. Security footage arrived next, and Renee watched her mistake unfold in digital clarity. The cameras showed Evan cleaning a conference room while Lucas did homework peacefully, showed the boy falling asleep over his math book, showed Evan gently carrying his son toward the service elevator, using his employee badge to access it. Then the footage showed something else: a wealthy couple exiting their room, seeing Evan with Lucas, and immediately calling security. Not because Evan had done anything wrong, but because of how he looked. The hotel had racially profiled their own employee, and Renee had enforced it without question. Morrison leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "We need to fix this, Carter. Fast." At 4:30 a.m., Renee sat across from Evan in an interview room, the handcuffs finally removed. His wrists showed red marks from the restraints, and he rubbed them absently, not meeting her eyes. "Your supervisor confirmed everything," Renee said quietly. "You're free to go. No charges. I'm sorry this happened." Evan's laugh was bitter and hollow. Sorry doesn't undo what Lucas saw. Sorry doesn't erase the video that's probably already viral. Sorry doesn't give me back my invisibility. He finally looked up and his eyes held something ancient and exhausted. "I've spent 4 years trying to disappear, Officer Carter. Trying to be so unremarkable that nobody notices me. Because the moment people start paying attention, the moment my face gets out there, we're in danger." Renee leaned forward carefully. "The tattoo on your arm, Silent Guardian, I know what it means. My mentor, Sergeant Malcolm Hayes, showed me a photo once. He said the men with that mark saved his life during a classified operation." Something flickered in Evan's expression. Surprise, maybe recognition. Malcolm Hayes was a good man. He understood what we did, why we had to vanish afterward. He was quiet for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. Operation Silent Guardian ran for 6 years, 17 operatives. We extracted high-risk targets from impossible situations, witnesses who knew too much, agents whose covers were blown, families targeted by people with government connections. We operated where official channels couldn't reach. "What happened?" Renee asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Someone leaked our operations. 3 team members died within 2 months. Car accidents, home invasions, things that looked random but weren't. The rest of us were told to scatter and disappear. My wife Sarah died 4 years ago. Carbon monoxide leak, they said. But I had checked that heater myself 2 days before. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it without putting Lucas at risk." His voice cracked slightly. "So I took my son and became invisible. Night shift maintenance, cheap apartment, no friends, no profile, just me and Lucas trying to survive. That tattoo was my only mistake, the last piece of who I used to be. And now, because of tonight, because of that video, I'm visible again." By 5:30 a.m., the video had exploded across social media. #Justice for Evan trended nationally, the footage showing exactly what it looked like. A black father in a work uniform, hands visible and cooperative, being handcuffed while his young son screamed in terror. The comments were brutal and righteous. "This is why people don't trust police. He was working and they arrested him like a criminal. That baby's trauma will last forever." Captain Lisa Chen called an emergency meeting, her expression thunderous as she reviewed the footage and the subsequent investigation. "A hotel racially profiled their own employee, and we enforced it without verification. The optics are catastrophic, but more importantly, we failed in our basic duty to seek truth before taking action." her gaze fixed on Renee. Officer Carter, this is your responsibility to fix, not the department's, yours. Renee found herself back at Morrison's desk, this time making a phone call she'd saved for years but never used. Special Agent Diana Torres at the FBI had worked with Malcolm Hayes on a corruption investigation. If anyone could verify Evan's story and help protect him now, it would be her. When Torres answered, Renee explained everything: the arrest, the tattoo, Evan's history, the viral video, the potential danger. Torres was quiet for a long moment after Renee finished. Operation Silent Guardian was real, classified and officially never existed. The operation ended 8 years ago after leaks suggested someone high up wanted it shut down. Several operators died under suspicious circumstances that were never properly investigated. If your guy has that tattoo with that numeral, he's legitimate, and he's been living in hiding for good reason. Her voice hardened. Whoever wanted those operators silenced 8 years ago probably still wants them dead. They're loose ends, witnesses to operations that implicated powerful people. If Evan's cover is blown now because of this media attention, he and his son are in serious danger. Renee felt ice spread through her chest. She hadn't just humiliated an innocent man. She'd potentially painted a target on his back and his son's. What do we do? Torres's response was immediate. You protect him, whatever it takes. Dawn broke over the city as Renee drove Evan home in her personal car, both of them exhausted and silent. The apartment complex was modest, its paint faded and sidewalks cracked. But someone had planted flowers in makeshift containers, trying to bring beauty to a place worn down by time and poverty. They climbed to the 3rd floor, where Mrs. Rodriguez's door opened before they knocked. The elderly neighbor's expression was worried and protective. Lucas hasn't slept. He keeps asking if his father is coming back. Then her eyes landed on Renee's uniform, and her warmth evaporated. Is this the officer who did this? Evan touched her arm gently. It's okay, Carmen. She's here to help now. Mrs. Rodriguez didn't look convinced, but moments later, Lucas burst through her doorway in dinosaur pajamas. Daddy! The boy crashed into Evan so hard they both stumbled. Lucas wrapped his arms around his father's waist and held on like he'd never let go, his small body shaking with sobs he'd been holding in for hours. Evan knelt down, finally able to embrace his son properly without handcuffs. I'm here, buddy. I'm okay. I'm so sorry you were scared. Inside their small apartment, Renee saw Evan's life in full. Furniture old but carefully maintained, bills stacked neatly by due date, Lucas's artwork covering the refrigerator. One drawing showed a stick figure in a maintenance uniform with a cape, labeled, My Dad the Hero. That image felt like a knife to Renee's chest. She knelt down to Lucas's eye level, the way Malcolm had taught her years ago. Lucas, my name is Renee. Last night I made a very big mistake. I handcuffed your dad without checking if he'd done anything wrong. I scared you, and I hurt your dad, and I'm deeply sorry. Lucas's voice came out small and shaking. Why did you do it? The question deserved complete honesty. Because I made assumptions based on how your dad looked, instead of listening to what he told me. Because I let other people's prejudice affect my judgment. None of those are good reasons, and none of them are your dad's fault. Lucas studied her face, searching for truth. Are you going to take him away again? Renee's throat tightened. No, sweetheart, never. Your dad didn't do anything wrong, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows that. After Lucas left for school, reluctant and scared, but reassured by his father's promises, Evan made coffee in silence. Renee sat at the small kitchen table, noticing a photograph tucked in the corner of a mirror. A woman with warm eyes and a radiant smile, holding a toddler. Sarah, Evan said quietly, following her gaze. My wife. She was a pediatric ICU nurse, saved kids' lives every day. Lucas has her smile. He handed Renee a mug and sat down heavily, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. You want to know the whole story? Fine, I'll tell you, because at this point, what do I have to lose? His voice carried years of suppressed pain. Operation Silent Guardian was my life for 6 years. I was good at it. Tactical extraction, getting people out of situations where regular law enforcement couldn't reach. Cartel witnesses, blown undercover agents, prosecutors with prices on their heads. We moved fast, left no trace, saved lives that would have been lost. Our last mission went wrong 8 years ago. We were extracting a federal witness with evidence of corruption involving police officials, city council members, organized crime across 3 states. The intel was compromised. We walked into an ambush. 3 of my team died that night. I survived with a bullet scar under my ribs and the knowledge that someone high up had betrayed us. His hands tightened around his coffee mug. The investigation was buried, classified, sealed. I tried to find who leaked our operation, but every door closed. Then Sarah started being followed. Strange cars outside our house. Anonymous threats. When she died in that accident, I knew. But I couldn't prove it, couldn't fight it without making Lucas a target. Evan's voice dropped to barely audible. So I took my son and disappeared into the kind of life where nobody looks twice. Night shift maintenance, cash jobs, cheap apartments, no friends, no trace of the man I used to be. I convinced myself that if I stayed invisible long enough, they'd forget about me, that Lucas could grow up safe. He looked at Renee with hollow eyes. And then last night happened. That video is everywhere. My face is viral. And whoever wanted me dead 8 years ago, they know where to find me now. Renee spent the day coordinating with Agent Torres and Captain Chen, building a protection plan that would keep Evan and Lucas safe while they investigated who had betrayed Operation Silent Guardian. The FBI would provide surveillance, and Renee would act as the direct liaison, her penance for the mistake that had exposed them. But first, she had to face the media storm. The press conference was brutal. Reporters shouted questions about racial profiling, improper procedure, departmental accountability. Captain Chen stood at the podium, her voice steady and unapologetic. Last night, Officer Carter responded to a call and made an arrest based on incomplete information. Upon investigation, we determined that Evan Walker, a valued employee of the Grand Elmont Hotel, had committed no crime. He was doing his job while caring for his son. We have issued a formal apology and are reviewing our protocols to ensure this doesn't happen again. But the questions kept coming. Was this racially motivated? Will Officer Carter face disciplinary action? What about the trauma to the child? Chen handled each with measured responses, but Renee could feel the weight of public anger pressing down. She'd become the face of everything people hated about police overreach, about bias, about the gap between protecting and harming. After the conference, Renee returned to Evan's apartment to brief him on the protection plan. She found him at the kitchen table, laptop open, scrolling through the comments and videos. His expression was unreadable. Lucas's school called. Other kids are asking him about the video. Some parents are asking uncomfortable questions. He came home crying. Evan closed the laptop slowly. This is what I was afraid of. Not just danger from whoever betrayed us, but the everyday cruelty of exposure. My son can't just be a kid anymore. He's that boy from the video. Renee sat across from him, the weight of responsibility crushing. Agent Torres is working to identify who leaked your operation. In the meantime, we have surveillance on your building, a panic button for emergencies, and I'll be checking in daily. Evan laughed bitterly. You're going to protect me now? That's rich. But beneath the sarcasm, Renee heard something else. Exhaustion so deep it had its own gravity. I don't have a choice but to trust you, Evan continued quietly. That's the worst part. You destroyed my safety, and now you're the only one offering to build it back. 3 days later, Agent Torres called with news. We've been reviewing the original investigation into Operation Silent Guardian's compromise. There was a detective who kept pushing for answers 8 years ago, Daniel Reeves. He died in a car accident 6 months after the operation was shut down, but his personal notes were saved by his partner, and we finally got access to them. Torres's voice carried controlled urgency. Reeves suspected someone in a federal oversight position was feeding information to organized crime figures in exchange for protection and payoffs. He had narrowed it down to 3 people before he died. One of them is now a state senator. Another is a federal prosecutor. The third retired but still has connections. She paused. Renee, if we can prove who it was, we can end this. Evan and the other surviving operators won't have to hide anymore. Renee brought this information to Evan that evening. He was helping Lucas with homework at the kitchen table, and the domestic scene felt both ordinary and fragile, a reminder of everything at stake. After Lucas went to bed, Evan sat heavily on the couch. You're telling me there might actually be an end to this? That Lucas could grow up without me constantly looking over my shoulder? That's what we're working toward, Renee confirmed. But we need your help. Torres wants to interview you about your missions, about anything unusual you noticed before the ambush, about who had access to your operation details. Evan was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands that had pulled people from danger, that had held his dying teammates, that now just tried to keep his son fed and safe. Finally, he nodded. I'll do it. Not for me, but for Lucas. And for Sarah. She deserved justice too. Over the next week, Evan worked with Torres and her team, reconstructing missions, identifying patterns, providing details from his exceptional memory. Slowly, a picture emerged. The leaks had always come before operations in a specific region, the Northeast Corridor, where the state senator had built his political base. Financial records showed unexplained deposits into shell companies connected to the senator's family. And most damning, surveillance footage from 8 years ago showed the senator meeting with a known organized crime figure just days before Operation Silent Guardian's final, fatal mission. We have enough for an investigation, Torres told Renee and Evan in a secured conference room. Not enough for an arrest yet, but enough to start applying pressure. If the senator thinks we're closing in, he might make a mistake. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. The state senator, feeling pressure from the FBI's inquiry, reached out to one of his old contacts, not knowing that Torres's team had that contact under surveillance. The recorded conversation was damning. Discussions of loose ends from the old operation, mentions of payments to ensure silence, barely coded threats about handling problems before they become public. Within 48 hours, federal agents arrested Senator Marcus Holbrook on charges of corruption, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. The news exploded across media, but this time the story was about justice finally served, about brave operators who had been betrayed, about the long reach of accountability. Evan's name was cleared publicly, his service finally acknowledged, and most importantly, the threat that had haunted him for 8 years was ended. Renee met Evan and Lucas at a park on a bright Saturday afternoon 2 weeks later. Lucas was playing on the swings, his laughter carrying on the crisp air, the sound of a child who could finally just be a child. Evan watched his son with an expression of cautious hope, something that had been absent from his face before. Torres said the other survivors are coming out of hiding too, he told Renee. Some of them have families who never knew what they did. Now they get to tell their stories. Renee stood beside him, watching Lucas play. I can't undo what I did that night. I can't give you back the safety you'd built or erase Lucas's trauma, but I can promise I learned something. Evan glanced at her. What's that? She met his eyes steadily. That the badge doesn't make me right. That procedure without judgment is just blind force. That justice requires courage. The courage to question, to investigate, to admit when you're wrong. She paused. Malcolm Hayes tried to teach me that. I just wasn't ready to hear it until I saw what happens when you forget it. Evan was quiet for a moment, then held out his hand. Not for a handshake, but offering something more. Forgiveness, maybe, or at least a truce. Renee took it, feeling the calluses from years of hard work, the strength that came from protecting what mattered. Lucas ran over, breathless and grinning, and grabbed both their hands. "Can we get ice cream? Please." Evan smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time since Renee had met him. "Yeah, buddy, we can get ice cream." As they walked together through the park, Renee thought about all the ways a single moment could change everything, how assumptions could destroy lives, but how truth could rebuild them, how the worst mistakes could become the greatest teachers if you had the courage to learn. She would carry that night forever, the memory of handcuffs clicking, of a child's screams, of a father's quiet dignity in the face of injustice. But she would also carry this: the knowledge that redemption was possible, that wounds could heal, and that sometimes the people you hurt the most could teach you how to be better. Not through their forgiveness, though that was a gift, but through their example of holding on to humanity, even when the world tried to strip it away.